Hello, everybody, and welcome to Angel Heart Radio. I'm Annette McCoy. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, and especially today because I'm with Janet Hickox. Janet's had a lot of excitement in her life recently, and let's face it, we're in for an interesting October, Janet, if we watch the stars and the planets.
Definitely, most definitely. It'll be a month to pay attention to what's going on into your life.
Yes, I loved that our topic for today, or the actual title, which I'm fiddling here at the moment because I'm trying to get on to.
I'm trying to remember what the title was. It was something
No,
fun.
I'm trying to remember it. Here we go. I'm sure I will find it in a moment. Yes, Wild and Wonderful October.
Indeed, wild and wonderful. Yeah. Well, anytime you have an eclipse, planets changing direction, planets moving into signs and out of signs, and a month where a planet that we're not used to seeing in retrograde goes retrograde, then you have, the potential for fireworks, and hopefully we don't get burnt.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
we can break it down.
We're ready for fireworks, are we?
I think it really depends on how you present this to yourself, right? Because a lot of our experiences are interpreted by us, right? So things can happen, and however it is that we interpret that will tell us, whether it's fireworks or is it a firestorm, right?
Right.
So it's going to depend, right, on, but I can tell you that with a lot of coming and going of planets, there's always going to be the potential for upsets, for unexpectedness. And as well as we look at the human design aspect of the month, we are looking at a time when the sun starts to move through the spleen center of the human design, which means that the potential for fear and for the shadow energies to pop up into our lives is very high. And in fact, we'll be dealing with all kinds of fears and shadows. And even if we look at the Pleiadian Earth calendar, we end up in a collective shadow period that looks like it begins right at, it might even begin, I think it's October 30th. I'm trying to see across the room, but my glasses aren't quite letting me do it. So we have a lot of potential to have to live through some of the things that we are afraid of, right? And I'm not talking about fears like afraid of spiders or snakes and that kind of thing, but our core wounds that tend to open back up when certain things happen or when certain things are triggered. So we really want to pay attention to the potential for the expression of those things during this particular month. Even into November, actually, right? It started last week, the last week of September, and into first week of November. So we're crossing over a few of these, months, but dealing with these different energies is going to take our skill, our finesse.
Ah.
Yeah, it's like we've been here before, people. We've been here before, so we can do this, right? We do this every year, by the way, right? In this time period, we end up in this. Yeah, every year. It's like clockwork, right? That last week of September, all of October, first week of November, the sun is moving through gates that are sitting on what we call the spleen center in our human design. And it's the spleen center that is a center for survival. And a lot of the actions that we take in our lives are meant to keep us surviving, right? But sometimes that very survival gets threatened by something someone says, and instead of dealing with it from an empowered way, we can sometimes dive into that real fear-based reactionary kinds of behaviors. So we'll want to watch out for that, right? We want to stay in the light if we can and stay on top of what we call false evidence appearing real, because we're not talking necessarily real fears like a dinosaur coming along to eat you, or an asteroid dropping on your head. I mean, sure, those things, well, except the dinosaur, those things could happen, but it's other fears that we're talking about, like a fear of not being adequate, or not knowing enough, or not being perfect, or being afraid the past is going to repeat itself, or being afraid of the future. Those are kind of vague fears that at some point in our collective evolution probably served us well. But at this point in our evolution doesn't necessarily serve us. If anything, it can
Mm.
serve to keep us from, our shining our lights. And, that's from the human design perspective, but we also have planets then that ever since we walked into the month, really, we started out the month of October with Venus in an opposition to Jupiter. Now, I always think of that as the month, whatever the month begins with, kind of is setting the stage, perhaps, like, you walk
Mhm.
into a scene and the scene sets the stage for the play. This is sort of setting the stage for the month of October. And it's
Mhm.
really a transit that really puts us in beneficial territory, like really looking at how do we grow ourselves from the inside out. Because at that point it's Jupiter who is in retrograde until later in next month, and it is Venus that is moving into Jupiter, coming out of the sign of Pisces and into Aries, where Jupiter is, giving us kind of a new beginning that aligns us with what we value and our value. So we start out the month kind of looking at ourselves from a different perspective. The very next day, October 2nd, the day that my daughter got married, Mercury turned to direct motion. And it did so very early in the morning, West Coast time, where I live. It was like midnight 58 or something like that.
Mhm.
So, just barely into the new day. And her wedding wasn't until 4 p.m. So Mercury even had time to straighten himself out before the wedding.
Did she deliberately choose that date?
No, not at all. But I'll tell you what happened. It was hysterical. A few days, it was last Sunday, I think it was. I got a frantic call from her because no, it wasn't Sunday. It had to have been like Tuesday. The guy that was going to marry them got COVID. And
Ah.
so he knew he wasn't going to test positive or test negative in time to perform the wedding, nor was he feeling well. He had, gotten really sick. So my husband ended up being not only the one to give her away, but also to marry her and Aaron.
Oh.
And so anyway, those were the Mercury retrograde, things were happening just before. But that day, everything was beautiful. Thank you, Mercury.
Mm.
Some plans work out, right?
Well,
Um,
I do believe that the universe is really in control, and sometimes we can get caught up in, oh, what's happening? Whereas if we take the time to take a deep breath, invariably it's like, well, this is perfect.
yeah, exactly. I like the way you said that, giving you time to take a deep breath, because this week we get to take a deep breath because we
Good.
don't have, there hasn't been much other than Mercury turning direct on Sunday, and Pluto turns direct on Saturday, my Saturday, so your Sunday. And those are the only things happening in this week. But as the month goes on, things, the pace kind of develops a little bit faster. And on Saturday, my Saturday, your Sunday, when Pluto turns direct, we begin to start to see those outer planets opening up the pathway for us to express our learning outward into the world. So Pluto represents transformation, empowerment, and we've been changing that on the inner planes, and now we're going to be able to start to demonstrate that of those changes that we've made inside into the outer world. So externalizing the changes that we've made internally. And I love that when Pluto, Pluto's way out there. So we don't usually
Mm.
think of, him as being something that's really impactful, but he really is because he impacts the collective because he's an outer planet. It's not so personalized. So all of the collective, so all of humanity at this point is in the process of beginning to re-express their power, to reassert themselves in an empowered way into the outer world. So Pluto turning direct, I believe this is going to be his last retrograde in the sign of Capricorn. So
Mm.
because he moves in March, he moves into Aquarius. He does retrograde back to Capricorn. Yeah. So one more retrograde in Capricorn, and then we're done with Capricorn, Pluto, and hopefully are well on our way to building a new world, and hopefully not one that's been destroyed in the process. Right? There is still that unknown quality. Remember that Pluto was discovered at the time that the atom bomb was being created. And so he does
Oh.
represent the power of life and the power of destruction. And the atom bomb, of course, really showed us the potential that humanity had stumbled into to actually destroy the planet. And what are we hearing a lot about in the news right now is about Putin, threatening the West with nuclear bombs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something that we've had. I mean, he keeps, drawing the parallel to Hiroshima and Nagasaki and threats, right? Those threats. And coming at a time where Pluto himself is changing direction gives me a little bit of chills down my arms, thinking about it. Um, I can't control what the man does,
Mm. Mm-hmm. We
but
can send out love and say,
right.
yeah.
Sending him the sanity, right, to
Mm.
to stop short of doing something that has already proven to be not so positive out
Mm.
there in the world when used. So that's that's one of those pivotal times I think of this month when we get into this time right around Pluto changing directions. So, and the other thing that's a little bit scary about it is that that happens the day before a full moon, right? And a full moon
Ah.
bringing things into culmination. That full moon is conjunct Venus. That is a saving grace. I believe there's like cooler heads prevailing because of that. It is also sextile Saturn. That makes me think that somebody thinks like maybe I should hide the keys to the nuclear bombs
Mm.
first, right? Or the button codes or whatever the heck they do, right? So I feel like we're marching to the brink of something and staying back from that in the end.
Mm.
So it's scary though to anticipate all of that. And I can feel like that, building up the news, cycle, building this up. So I'm thinking we're, getting out of that maybe through diplomacy or just maybe through cooler heads prevailing. And at the very next day after the full moon, then Mercury, who is now no longer retrograde, is moved into Libra, a sign that represents tact and diplomacy. And Mercury, the communication planet, hopefully bringing us the ability to use words, to use, other tools to solve problems rather than resorting to war or
Mm-hmm.
anarchy or anything like that. So while there's always going to be the potential for us to express the more destructive tendencies,
Mm-hmm.
there's also some other players that are helping us to express the higher energies of, love and peace in it as well.
Yes, and it's a timely reminder that that's what we need to stay in as much as we possibly can, rather than going
Yeah,
down that
exactly.
fear. I'd like to welcome Stephanie Coy. She's made it. And if anyone is watching through any other avenue, please go to Angel Heart Radio Facebook page, because yes, you can see Janet and I, and you can also join in the conversation. So
Yes, we love conversation, don't we, Annette?
we do. Yes, it's lovely to interact with our audience.
Yeah, it is indeed. Especially because this is such a pivotal month that people might be, irregardless of how much in your own personal life is going on, you can feed into that bigger, wider world scope of aspects, happenings, and so forth. I mean, I'm you, me, we're thousands of miles away from Ukraine and from
Mm-hmm.
Russia, but it's still impacting us on the psychic level. I mean, our dreams, I notice my own dreams are a bit chaotic. My husband keeps waking up and going, "Whoa, what was that dream?" And so
Mm.
kind of in our psyches is this, you know, danger of the times that we're in, and it may be coming out, in our sleep patterns. So either interrupting our sleep or bringing us dreams, or I want to say irrational fears. In human design, as we were talking about a little bit about that at the beginning of the show, those fears, we call them false evidence appearing real for a reason. It's that they really, present us with old material, old DNA material even, that we are rising above and moving beyond. So for
Mm-hmm.
example, that week of this week of the 3rd of October to the 7th of October, the sun is digging in at a gate called the Well in the I Ching. And it's a gate that really reminds us that all of the answers, all of the questions lie within us, right? They're within us. And that we can trust this well of deep information, whether it's something from our own experience or not, doesn't matter. It's all here. Why? Because we are all interlinked. And not only are we all interlinked, so all your experiences are my experiences, are your next door neighbor's experiences, right? They're common between us, but we're also linked via spirit. So it reminds us that inadequacy, which is what the fear is, I don't know enough, I don't have enough degrees, I don't have enough certifications, I don't have enough study done. That's a false fear, right? That we're all designed to go out there and just tap in and do whatever it is that we love, follow our passion, live our lives. So that's what we deal with this week. But once we get to the 8th, which is Saturday for us, Sunday for you, the day that Pluto turns direct, and also the full moon will be in this same area, is the gate 57, and that's a fear of the future. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of feel how that one's shaping up, because is there a future for planet Earth? I don't know. The
Mm.
weather's funky. It's hot here when it should be raining. It's sunny when it should be raining. I don't know there's fires, there's floods in weird places, hurricanes that, jump out into massive killers. You know, it leaves us kind of wondering, like, what's next? I don't even want to ask that question anymore. I don't want to know. If it happens,
No,
then I'll
that's
deal with
right.
it.
We can only deal with the present, and that's another timely reminder, isn't it? Bev
Yeah.
Kirk has joined us. Thank you, Bev, and she's very impressed with what we're saying. She's saying important information, ladies. And
Yeah.
Stephanie Coy is she's multitasking because she's at work. So good on you, Stephanie. Thank you so
I
much.
love it that she can do both at work. I love it. I love it. I think she's a manifesting generator anyway, right? Stephanie, I don't remember, but uh so anyway, those fears are kind of old. The fear of the
Mm.
future, it kept our species alive for sure, right? We I don't know that they are our human ancestors. I'm not sure that they would have had that as fear, but it would have certainly been a survival mechanism, right? For them to put food away, or to, make warmer clothing, or to move to warmer climates or to move indoors from outdoors. Those kinds of things are, survival mechanisms that over time became the false evidence appearing real, right? If we still have the instinctual need to survive. That is still
Mm.
with us. That is still in our DNA. But what has happened in our more diverse minds, in our more activated minds, is that we have turned, what was a natural movement towards surviving the season or surviving the, whatever, into false evidence appearing real. So the fear then for that particular week of the full moon and Pluto's moving direct and Mercury moving into Libra is really about what's going to happen next, what happens
Mm.
in the future. And you are absolutely right. The future isn't here yet. There is no life in the future, right?
Mm.
There's no breath in the future, so there's no life. We only breathe in this moment. So thinking about or worrying about or having anxiety over the future really doesn't serve us from an evolutionary standpoint, nor does it, functionally help us in this day and age. But yet it's there. It's still there. And the other thing about that week, at least from a human design perspective, is that the Earth inhabits the gate 51 at the same time the sun is moving through the gate that has a fear of the future. The Earth moves through the 51, which is is a gate of shock. And often it is something, how a shock can initiate you into a higher way of being. So the Earth is at the gate that is initiating us into seeing more from our higher power, right? Seeing more
Mhm.
from our spiritual self. But sometimes, you have to have the house dropped upon your head in order to wake up enough to understand that what you're doing isn't in your best interest. So for some people, that same week could also bring some shocking events or shocking moments designed to awaken you to a higher purpose. You know, how many
Mhm.
times have you heard from someone who's survived cancer or some other, terrible tragedy, and they say how positively it impacted their life? Like in the moment it was terrible, but
Mm.
how they decided life was precious and they were going to spend every moment in, doing things that they love, or that it impacted them to, eat better, work smarter, spend more time with friends and family. Those are positive aspects that shock can bring, but we're a stubborn species, right? Sometimes we need that, like
Mm.
paddles to shock us awake, right?
Yeah,
So
the
there's
wake up
that,
call.
like the wake up call, and that happens that same week. So that 8th through the 13th of October, a little bit dicey, right? When it comes to, it's hard to predict, right? What's going to be going on from the outer world. It's bracketed on one end by the full moon and Mercury moving into Libra and Pluto turning direct. And it's bracketed at the other end by a lot of Saturn kinds of transits. Eh, not bad, but just kind of like, what are we doing? Where are we going? What should we
Yeah.
do? What should we think? So cooler heads needing to prevail in that particular week, especially. And, it's not just human design, because the aspects as well in astrology that week also show us that Sun comes into a connection with Saturn, and Mars comes into a challenge with Neptune. Mercury is challenged by Jupiter. It's kind of, a long train of aspects that week that are designed to keep us kind of hopping from one foot to another, right? Kind of getting, I think, maybe shaking us out of our reverie, shaking us out of our comfort zone, so that we can really see where we've gotten entrenched in behaviors or actions that aren't supporting us or aren't supporting sustainability. So there's a lot of reasons for things to happen that are on an evolutionary scale rather than just, us experiencing, some kind of hurricane or flood or fire, whatever, or earthquake. So evolutionarily, we are being waken up as well. So it can feel challenging to us. It can feel like our very survival is threatened. But literally, humanity has been here for a very long time. We're not going anywhere unless we destroy each other.
Mm.
We can hold on. We have to hold on so that you can take your trip.
Indeed.
Right, 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 right. And the thing to be watchful of is are the things that you can do, right? Watch for opportunities in of things that you can do. Don't be so
Mhm.
caught up in, well, I can't change this, or I can't do that, or it's not my job, or those kinds of things. Be wary of that kind of behavior. Look for the things that you can do, the solutions that you can buy into, or the things that you can do to help, the things that you can do to help yourself, right?
Mm.
That, you know, we we're going to have to find that nice balance between selfishness and self-centeredness. There is a pathway between the two that becomes self-supportive or self-sustaining, self-preserving, that kind of thing. So that's a kind of a big week. And then we move into the next week where the fear then changes from that fear of the future to the fear of failure,
That's a big one, as
right?
well
That's
as
a
the fear of success.
correct, right? It's always the both sides of the coin.
Mm.
And in that particular week, that's the 14th through the 19th of the month of October, we also have a powerful Sun square Pluto and Venus square Pluto. Anytime a planet squares Pluto, whether it's an inner or an outer planet, we have challenges to bring ourselves more into alignment with power, or we see power struggles going on around us, or within our governments, or within our neighborhoods and things like that. So that tells me that there's some challenging things coming out that particular week. And, the challenge isn't about hurting us, right? It is seeing if we can rise to the occasion, right?
Hmm.
Will we rise to the occasion? And, note the two planets, Sun and Venus. So they're both, the sun is very powerful in terms of shining that very big spotlight on the what is happening. But Venus can also sort of heal and make something easier than otherwise it might be. So I think there are good and bad things to think about for that week. The moon at that time will be in Leo. Moon being in Leo can sometimes overblow something that's happening, or can, over exaggerate things. Um, so we will just have to be careful to keep our own counsel that week of the month, right? To not get on Facebook and call people names, and, it's just keep your own counsel, and not buy into all of the rhetoric or buy into everything you hear on the news. Likely there is some aspects of subterfuge going on. Um, Pluto is a planet that hides things in the dark, right? He is the lord of the underworld. So we can either have things coming up out of the dark, or we can have things that are being hidden from us going on. It's hard to say, but that week culminates with Saturn turning direct, meaning he's moving out of retrograde and reestablishing our outer building of something, our outer structures and forms being put into place, our outer foundation building, right? So we've been doing that internally, and now that changes October 22nd to being built in the outer world. And that same day, Venus and the Sun conjunct. That is awesome, right? To have those two. So the thing is, to me, the whole month, as chaotic as it could be, is being charmed by Venus, being mitigated somewhat by Venus, her presence. Her signature is everywhere in it. She doesn't
Hmm.
seem like she would be that big of a power player, but she can turn aggression into a mild mannered sort of disagreement, right? So instead of turning into the full on fist fight, we might just get in each other's faces and go, you know what? Let's just agree to disagree, right? That's her impact. So she might take, something big on the screen that is appearing like it's going to happen and somehow mollify it or, make it less than. So we might get to
Good
the point.
old, good old Venus, eh? Well
Right.
done.
Yes. Well done, Venus. Um, and then the day of the change from Libra into Scorpio, your time of year, Venus also changes in tandem with the sun into the sign of Scorpio. Now, that can be good, bad, because Scorpio, of course, is ruled partly by Pluto and Mars, right? They're co-rulers of that sign. So, do we have a positive Venus impact that, sees cooler heads prevailing, or do we end up with a sort of more aggressive Venus or a hothead, kind of situation? Hard to say, but that happens just 2 days before a solar eclipse. Excuse me. Uh,
Whoa.
So, but this is a partial solar eclipse. And that also means that the moon and the sun and Venus will all be fairly close to one another in a conjunction. So, do we have a smoothing over effect,
Mm.
or do we have, a runaway train kind of effect? So, I'm
Is that
I'm
up to
thinking,
us or?
I really think it is. I think all of this is up to us, right? Do
Mm,
we, I can't control what, say, somebody like Putin does. I just can't, right? But I can set into motion in my own life. I can put out as much love as I can to the world that hopefully other people are doing as well. And then we stack love on top of love on top of love,
mhm.
and that can change the world. I mean, literally.
Sure.
So in a way, yeah, it is our responsibility. I don't want to be Pollyannish and say, that's going to solve all of our problems, but it
Mm,
goes a long way to preventing the other side of that, which is, runaway Mars aggression or runaway Pluto annihilation, that kind of thing. So
mm.
it's it's a tenuous time we are entering into. So for us, the most important thing is to focus on what we love, focus on what you can affect in your life, and did I say love? Focus on love and focus on more love. Keep going into the love train, right?
Well, that's a very timely message, isn't it? Because I think sometimes um, it's probably easy to slip
Mm.
into negative feelings rather than saying, no, 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 I'm going to stay in love. What can I do that is loving today? Especially to
Yeah.
ourselves, Janet. Sometimes we
Yeah.
forget about that too.
Right. Yep. I know how many nights I laid awake over this last week, beating myself up for the dress I chose, for the shoes that don't
Oh,
work, for the la 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 la. To the point where I was awake like hours in the night because I'm worried about the stupid dress that I'm wearing to my daughter's wedding. Really. We can be our own worst enemies in that way, right? And if you
absolutely.
compound that with aspects that are, putting sort of this pressure on us, it can really get to us. And during that period of time, so from October 20th until the 24th, excuse me. So we right up to the eclipse, but not at the eclipse. We have a very interesting fear gate that gets triggered, and it's gate 50. If anybody out there wants to know what gate am I talking about, it's the gate 50, which is on the spleen center, because all the gates this month with the sun are on that center. The fear there is about failing in our responsibilities to our family, our tribes, or our communities. It's a place where we tend to want to take on too much responsibility, where we want to smother mother, right? Smother mothering instead of, mothering and giving people their own responsibility to, mend their own fences and to build their own foundations. We instead try to clobber them with, smothering and make things happen the way that we think they should happen and what have you. But it's even more interesting when you look at that gate in Gene Keys, which the Gene Keys is just another discipline study, very similar to the human design, that built upon the human design, but we get to see it in a more holographic view, right? We get to see it from the shadow, the gift, and the highest expression, which we call the city. And when we look at the gate 50, what we see is corruption. That's the shadow energy, is corruption, but not corruption like you are already thinking about, like, oh, politics and corrupt politicians. Not that kind of corruption specifically, but the kind of corruption that happens. You know how when we were kids and we'd play telephone, right? And the message was XYZ, but somehow it got turned around to ZYX and then YXZ. And by the time it got to the other person, that message was so corrupted, right? Because the the taking of that first message didn't get brought to the next person correctly. So this is the kind of corruption that we are dealing with that week. Like, where did we misinterpret the energy, the words that someone said, the intent behind something, um, our own intentions perhaps? So where did the message coming into us get corrupted? And then where did we pass on that corrupted message? So, for instance, when we download a program to our computer or software to our computer, you get the screaming message if there's something wrong with that program. Your computer is going to tell you there's a corruption. The file won't run, file corrupt. And you have to erase it or uninstall it and reinstall it so that you don't have that corruption. Well, the same thing here for us as human beings, or for life on this planet in general. Where's the message gotten corrupted? And that means maybe we have to cut out the whole of that message to bring in the right message, right? To fix that corruption. Now that's going to happen for us individually, but also collectively, right? So that's an interesting thing to think about, right? So we can go along in our lives misidentifying our purpose, misidentifying our reasons for doing our why, our what, because we got some kind of message maybe from the collective or from our family, from our culture, that was incorrect for us personally. So we get to course correct, and we do that via the Earth that week, which is in a gate called innovation. Oh, innovate, right? Do something different, right? Try something new. But also know that when we try something new, you can't just give up when it doesn't work the first time. You kind of have to stick with it and give it some staying power before you throw it all away again. So that's an interesting week to me, with all these other things going on in terms of transits of planets, Saturn turning direct and Venus moving into Scorpio. When we get to the 25th, when we have the eclipse, and everything that follows after that is kind of crazy making, in terms of Mars turns retrograde. We enter into the collective shadow period of time, which is a 13-day period or 20-day period of time where the whole of the collective shadows are in our faces, right? So we have these fear gates, and now we have fear and shadows that are showing up collectively. And that last week, the fear energy is really about the fear of purposelessness. Like, what is all the reasons? What is all this for? Right? Purposelessness is the fear. Like, this has no meaning, right? That there's just this one life, we die, and that's it, right? There's nothing more. And there's a lot of people in this world out there, that are indoctrinated by their belief systems or religions that believe that this is all there is. And then you either go to heaven or hell. Right. And so I think it's kind of pervasive on the planet now that we're, always searching outside of ourselves for meaning. We're looking outside of ourselves for purpose. And it really lies within us, right? You're giving
Indeed.
your life meaning. You give your life purpose. That
Mm.
week, the fear might be really about, there's no purpose. What am I here for? Right? Kind of
Mm.
giving up and, just going into your cave and not participating in life. So we'll
Can
have to
I
deal with that.
interrupt you for a moment,
Yeah.
Janet? Because our lovely friend Londa has joined us,
Hi,
and
Londa.
she said that love heals all, which is a lovely
Mm.
reminder. And she's asked you a question: is it possible to look at someone's transitioning points or possibilities?
Yes, it is. It is. For
Okay.
example, often the nodes are involved. And transitioning, she means, I'm sure she means like death, rebirth kind of things. So often the nodes are engaged in creating the portal through which we can transition out of the planet and into spirit. And other times it's other planets. It really depends on the person, what their ruling planets are, what their chart looks like. And it's not something that I ever go looking for. It's it almost becomes clearer in hindsight as to what that trigger was. The moon is often engaged as a trigger or as a catalyst. Mars can sometimes be engaged as a catalyst, and the nodes can catalyze a transition. Pluto, he rules the underworld. So it can be, there's a number of things that it's kind of unique for each person. Uranus can also be engaged at that level as he brings the things like shock, or the unexpected into it. So someone who falls dead from an unexpected heart attack, likely I'm going to see that transition had something to do with the planet Uranus. Right. Now, in a natural death, like the Queen's death, right, we're moving into older age. And in fact, I think on her death certificate, it said that she died from old age. That one's less pin downable because that kind of feels to me like that person chose to wind it down and and to walk
Mhm.
through whatever gateway opened up. Um, so yes, it's possible. And no, it's not the kind of astrology I like to do because you have free will, right? You have free
Sure.
will. Eclipses are also great times for transitions to happen. And of the two, the solar eclipse, which is what we have on October 25th, and then on November 8th, the lunar eclipse, they are sometimes um, what I would call portal ways. Like when we think about galactic astrology, Antares, the star, and oh my God, the other star's name just went out of my head. Antares and I'll have to think about that. Two stars, they create a portal way in and out of the planet. And that is going to annoy the heck out of me now. Hmm. Anyway, the nodes do sort of a similar thing. They create a portal way, and it's the nodes that are involved with eclipses. So the eclipses also form sort of a tunnel. So it's not unusual for a lot of people to transition in or around the time period of eclipses, right? That maybe a week or two before an eclipse, and then the week or two of the eclipse, and then the week or two after the eclipse, right? There's just this like a wormhole effect, right, of time
Right.
that people can exit. So, but it's, again, depending on an individual's chart. So it's always,
Lond Londa is saying, oh my God, Pluto, underworld stuff. Mum's
yeah,
processing heaps.
yeah, right. And
And
she may
there's,
be processing stuff and she may go to the brink and come back. It may not be
mm,
her right time. Or she could go to the brink and dip her toe in the pool and go, okay, the water's warm and I'm going.
mm.
Each soul has
Now,
their choice.
Londa also says Lyra or Andromeda.
Andromeda, they're
Andromeda.
constellations. I'm talking about stars. It's Antares and, oh, I almost had it. Antares is in Scorpio. The other one is in Taurus.
Your knowledge.
Aldebaran. Aldeb. Aldebaran. So we have Aldebaran in Taurus and Antares in Scorpio that form portal ways for entities to come into our solar system. So through via a wormhole. So we have that same sort of effect in our own lives when we look at eclipses and nodes and that kind of thing. They form these wormholes, entry and exit points.
Well, Londa's saying, when do we have the next eclipse? I'm wondering whether she means after the one that's coming up soon.
October 25th is the solar eclipse, and November 8th is the lunar eclipse. Of the two, the lunar eclipse is far more powerful, far more effective, right? The solar eclipse is a partial solar eclipse. It's a south node eclipse as well, which means that it's aligning with the south node. And to me, that might be sort of the life review kind of thing that maybe your mom is going through at the moment, processing through things that have happened in her lives, the things she should have done, the things that she did do, all that kind of stuff that, maybe even in, a hallucinogenic state, even, seeing people from her past and what have you, because the south node is very heavily in the past. The north node will be the lunar eclipse. And that's a new gateway, right? That's the new energy. So if there's a transition coming for her, it might be that lunar eclipse that'll happen at 16 degrees of Taurus. So again, very close to that, same portal way that we were talking about with the stars, and the nodes are forming that same portal way. And I think that all along we've had this energy across Taurus and Scorpio, which is already known to be a portal way kind of astrology sign. So, hence we've seen a lot of important people transitioning through this portal time, right? So, important people in our lives transitioning unexpectedly through that kind of wormhole, portal way that's been there.
All right.
Yeah.
Londa says exactly. So
Nice.
Janet, you have always amazed me. The knowledge that you have and just how you can, off the top of your head, so seemingly jump in. It's amazing. So
Yep.
thank you for all
You're
that
very
you
welcome.
share with us.
Yeah.
This is, yeah.
Mm.
I
Go ahead. Sorry.
had no idea about seeing eclipses as a tunnel, so to speak.
Yeah, they're big gateways. It's a
Mm,
gateway time, but we think of an eclipse as happening on a day, right?
yes.
And another one on another day. But they're working in tandem with one another in a way. And they're also part of a series. If you really look at eclipses, they come in series. We call them a Saros cycle, where eclipses match up to other eclipses at other times in history. And like the first eclipse that would have occurred when you were born is part of a cycle. And so you may not have any effects from any eclipses until the next one of that cycle occurs, which who knows when that might be. So, so not all people respond to eclipses the same way because it really depends on what eclipse cycle they were born into and when is the next eclipse of that cycle.
Right.
So that's another
Mm.
very deep way of looking at it. Why some people, have issues with eclipses and others are like, well, I skated right through it. Didn't bother me a thing at all. But, it's not going to be that way. Maybe the next eclipse is one that's going to be, pounding on you. So it really just depends. Now, to end this month, we end up with Mars in retrograde.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think it was last month we talked about the fact that Mars was going to be in Gemini for 7 months.
Yeah.
Right? From he moved in there and he moved in at the end of August, I believe, and all the way through March 26th, 2023. And that's because his retrograde is happening. So when Mars turns retrograde, he represents the forward motion, right? The principle of moving ahead. And when he goes retrograde, that means action kind of slows down. It almost makes us feel like we have both the foot on the brake and the gas at the same time. We're spinning our wheels, going 2 steps forward and then a step back. So I expect that, if you've got something that you're trying to get up off the ground or something that you're trying to make, move forward, there could be stalling things along the way, right? Stop signs where you least expect it, traffic jams where you least expect it. Now he's doing this in the sign of Gemini, which is an air sign. So you know how air is free flowing, right? Air just blows wherever it wants to, right? Even if you have the windows shut, sometimes you're feeling the air coming in around the windows because
Mm-hmm.
air moves and it defies boundaries, really. And Mars is a planet of action whose boundaries are being kind of clipped during that period of time. So there could be some, frantic thinking, some anxiety, some trying to get things going and feeling like, I can't get it going, or then getting it going and realizing you forgot to do something and have to go backwards in time, go back and, fix things. So what is it good for? It is great to connect from October 30th all the way through January 12th of 2023, a perfect time for reimagining your life, reimagining your business or your relationship or, your dreams, uh, reinventing yourself, right? Re
Mm-hmm.
do an inventory on everything that you think about who you are, about where you're going, and make a new plan. Make a new plan. Think in terms of possibilities.
Okay, well, Londa's saying not a good time to launch your website.
Depends on if you've already had the website out in production beforehand. You
Right.
know, so Mercury really is the one that rules websites, but then Mercury rules Gemini. So, and Mars is in Gemini. So you might have, you know, some issues around it. I would take it slow. I would I would do, test every component if you're in a position to have to launch a website, and make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. That you just
Mm-hmm.
don't throw it all out there and expect it to be perfect, because it might not be. But I wouldn't be afraid of launching, because you actually began the creative process well before that retrograde happened. So I
Right.
hope that makes sense, right? Timing is what it is, right? I don't know why it is that this particular website might need to be launched at this particular time, but I guarantee you it started before the retrograde. Now today, if you told me you wanted to launch a website on Halloween that you just now are starting, I would be a little less excited about you launching that, because there hasn't been enough, creative time. The Another thing to think about is you could launch it, know that you might, in the end, look at it and go, let's tweak that, or let's change that, or this might be a better way to present that material, or I don't like the way that that's working, or something that you might need to redo some things.
Okay. Well, Londa's saying okie dokie.
I mean, what else can you do, right? It's going to launch when it's going to launch, right? Um, yeah. Now, lastly, and I know our time's ticking down here, the last thing, Halloween itself, lovely day, right? The moon transitions that morning out of Capricorn and into Aquarius. So the weird, the wild, and the wonderful is the rule for that night. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about Saturn, as he is, preparing to move direct and has been in retrograde. So he's retrograding backward through gates in your human design that he's already been through. And he, on October 5th, which is today, right? My October 5th is today. Uh, he has moved back into the gate 13, which is a gate for us to redefine our stories, right? So we all have a story that we come a story that we tell about our experiences, about who we are as human beings. And it's maybe time to re-script the script, right? Tell a new story. Think of something, if you've always been telling a story of how you were disempowered or how you were disenfranchised or how you didn't get what you wanted, maybe rewrite the story a bit to include, yeah, I didn't get what I wanted, but I got this instead and it was so much better, right? Or I don't know why I didn't get that thing or that, job or that whatever, but I'm so happy where I am, right? Flip the script, rewrite the script. So that's what Saturn is teaching us, at least through the end of October.
You're letting us know, certainly, that as you said earlier, Janet, it is the planet of free choice. And we need to remember that, don't we? Very, very clearly.
Yeah, very clearly.
And the clearer that we can be about what we desire, the easier it is, because rather than hanging on to it and going, oh, I really want this to happen, it's so important that we have our desires, so to speak, and then we hand them over. It's like, okay, I'm not in control of how it happens. I'm simply asking for this to happen.
Right. And therein lies the key to your peace in all of this, right? Your PEACE, peace in all of this, is that the how isn't up to you. That's the universe delivers that, or it brings you the opportunities. They're attracted to you, right? The opportunities. You just have to stay focused on the what and do the things, taking new action in your life or making choices that are congruent with what you desire. If you're not making choices that are congruent to what you desire, let's say, you're saying you want something, but you keep making choices that are not that, then you can't blame the universe. You could only blame yourself for not getting in line, getting aligned with what you truly desire. So keep that in mind too, that whatever you're focusing on is what you're really energizing toward you. And if that's not what you truly want, beware, right? Because you've got to change your thoughts. You got to change not just your thoughts, but your choices that you make in response to what you think about or in response to what you desire. And if you're trying to up level your game, you need to make not only choices, but you need to make new choices, right? Because otherwise it's insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a new result is insane. So you have to up level. You need to actually up level. You have to do something new. You have to take new action steps, or else you get the same results that you've always gotten. And you didn't like those, obviously, because you were aiming at something new. So I have to keep reminding myself I'm just as guilty as anybody else of thinking like, well, why didn't that work? Why? Probably because I was just trying to do the same thing.
Words are easy. It's so easy to sit here and wax lyrical. It's walking the talk and remembering.
Yeah, and you know what? Some of the biggest lessons of 2022 for all of us have been about walking our talk and talking our walk, right? Being in our own lane and, being in alignment. Like if you want to blame all your politicians for, making stupid mistakes or being, choosing things that are unsustainable, you must be looking at your own life and what choices you're making. Are you feeding into the old, or are you, feeding, into something new that is sustainable? I'm just using that as an example, because anything that we want to throw outward away from us and blame others for, it's a sure bet that you're also participating in it negatively yourself. Because otherwise you wouldn't be blaming, you would be trying to empower. Yeah. Anyway.
Yes, it's very easy to point the finger rather. And I realize quite often what I'm noticing in somebody else is one of my traits or characteristics or actions. And it's like, oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you, universe, for reminding me.
Yes.
And sometimes, it's just pointing out that you have a judgment on that or on that person or something like that. So anyway, we always get to choose. So let's choose things that, not are the same old, but are things that are going to take us into new territory. So
Very
we can become the
cool.
biggest selves that we can be, best
Yes,
selves that we can be.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Janet, it has been an absolute delight, and I'd like to thank those who entered into the conversation with us, and I'd like to thank everybody who has chosen to be with us today. May I remind you that these shows should never replace your legal, medical, nor professional advice, nor your own sound judgment. It has been my pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to being with you again next week. Marnie Perner will join me next week, and Janet, I look forward to seeing you. It'll be the 30th of November for you. Sorry, the 30th of, no,
Third.
I'm wrong again. The 1st of November for you, and the 2nd for me. No, still wrong.
Second for me, third for you.
There we go. All right, I've got that.
You know why we got confused? Because we're seeing each other twice in my November.
That's exactly right. It's so.
Yeah. So it gets
I love
confusing.
the way we. Yes, time is an interesting phenomenon.
Right. Like I've just time traveled to the future to be with you, and now I'm going to time travel backwards to be back where I am. Anyway,
dear.
we will see you next month.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Annette.
I hope we've given you a laugh as well as information.